This episode contains references to suicidal thoughts and self-harm. Listener discretion is advised.
I am proud to be a woman.
Girls and women are
powerful,
beauty,
badass,
feminine,
passion,
equality,
power, professional,
diligence,
advocates for change.
Welcome to She Plus, the female empowerment podcast that tells the extraordinary stories of everyday humans. I'm your host, Elise Dean. On today's episode, we spoke with Wendall Churchill about her book, Confessions of Madness: My Journey with Mental Illness. On page 4 of Wendall's book, she writes, "Being normal is no longer an option. God, help me, please." But if you ask Wendall today about this line in her book, like I did in our interview, she might tell you something different.
No, I don't believe that anymore. Because, it's funny. I wrote that book. Then I did a panel discussion after it came out. And I just saw the panel discussion replay because we hadn't uploaded it. And I was like, oh, gosh, I'm even beyond that point. I'm beyond the book, and now I'm beyond the panel discussion. And so, I'm moving along. And so, no, I don't believe that. But I did for 30 years. I thought I wasn't normal.
Wendall has bipolar I disorder. Bipolar disorders are brain disorders. They can cause fluctuations in your mood, ability to function, and energy levels. Bipolar I is characterized by mood swings, such as manic and depressive episodes. Also, there's no singular factor that causes bipolar disorder. Science often points to genetics and brain structure as primary components, but it could look different depending on the person. Here's what it's like for Wendall.
My bipolar is considered bipolar I, rapid cycling, mixed states. And I don't know I'm not really sure how the doctors do it, but I say with dysphoric mania. So bipolar is a mixture of mania and depression that, and I have rapid cycling. So I can cycle within one day 3 times between mania and depression. And my mania, some people have a sort of an elated mania, where my mania is agitated and aggravated and irritated, and it's horrible. There's no fun in it at all. And so, I get a mixed state, which is the mania and the depression together. So that's a very serious condition because it can lead to suicidal ideation.
Wendall initially wrote Confessions of Madness as an exercise to get her thoughts onto paper, but it quickly evolved into something more.
Well, I wrote the book as an exercise to see if I could get my thoughts on paper, because at the time of the writing, I couldn't really think clearly because of the medicine, and the illness itself makes your thoughts confused. And so I just wanted to see if I could write again, And then I guess after I had written a certain amount, I thought, someone could use this. Someone could read this and get something out of it. And so then I thought maybe it could help somebody, even if it just helped one person, that would be worth it, and it's not going to be a big financial windfall, but helping one person would be a great thing.
Though Wendall initially believed that this book was meant for people living with bipolar disorder, Wendall now believes this book might also be useful for a different audience.
Well, it's funny. I first thought it was people like me, and that's why I made it short and very succinct and not wordy and full of fluff. As you probably wonder why there's not a lot of fluff. Because people who have mental illness have trouble reading, and they can't concentrate, and they can't focus, and reading a big thick tome was impossible. So that's why it's really short. But now that it's done and everything's finished, I think the target audience really are the family members and the friends, so that they can understand what it's like to have a mental illness and the struggle and the loneliness and maybe the behaviors and everything, because they don't get it, and why should they? They don't have it. They don't, it's hard to identify with other things. And maybe this, because people can't verbalize not all people can verbalize their thoughts clearly. And maybe this helps a family member understand what their loved one's going through.
But in order to understand where Wendall is today and how she got there, I want to take you back to the very beginning, which starts on page 7, when Wendall was 4 years old.
I just reconnected with a childhood friend. We just called her out of the blue last week, and I told her about my illness, and she had no idea. She was like, I thought I was an athlete. She thought of me as a star, is what she said, and she didn't see any of that. But inside, I was like just falling apart. Every Sunday night, the night before school, I was a nervous wreck. And then the first day of every school year, when you go buy your shoes and stuff, I was just like dying inside. And no one knew. No one even knew. And I thought, how could they not know? I kept thinking, why doesn't anyone know what's going on with me? And I guess I sort of think I raised myself emotionally on my own. And I didn't do such a hot job. And I had all the comforts of home, and I had a nice childhood. Nothing bad happened or anything like that. But I was just sort of miserable. Even though I did well in school and I did well in the sports athletic fields, but I was just I think the biggest symptom was anxiety. It wasn't really depression so much as anxiety, but the anxiety was just out of control.
Growing up, Wendall loved to play sports. She says that she often hyper-focused on the ball, which gave her an escape from her thoughts and anxiety. But she struggled to navigate a relationship with her family at home. In the book, she writes, I craved my mother's comfort, but as I grew older, she became less and less willing to hold me close.
My family was not a good support system, and it was very, very difficult on me. But I found my family and my psychiatrist. And so when I hear of other people who suffer with mental illness who have these great families, I'm so jealous, But I put all my efforts into my relationships with my psychiatrist, and they were my support system, So I would say my family failed me, but I guess they did the best they could. They only have the skills they have, but it was still a major disappointment.
Her childhood was characterized by her anxiety and this turbulent relationship with her family. So when she set off for college at Middlebury, a private liberal arts college in Vermont, she felt free of disappointment. And for the most part, college for Wendall was great. She enjoyed intramural sports, reading books, and accelerating towards her future. She loved how mathematics was a universal language, and ultimately she chose it to be her major. But during her senior year, her undiagnosed disorder was brimming just underneath the surface. She graduated in 1986, but would not be formally diagnosed with bipolar disorder until 1989, 3 years later. Not long after graduating from Middlebury, Wendall pursued a graduate degree in landscape architecture at the University of Virginia. The degree prompted a trip to Venice, Italy, to study and sketch architecture. As Wendall writes, my sojourn in Italy turned out to be the precipice from which I finally slipped into full-blown madness.
We were in Italy studying landscape architecture for graduate school, getting extra credits and stuff. And we were looking at Italian villas. So we were going around the country sketching famous villas from the 14th and 15th century. And when I was there, I was slipping, It's kind of hard to describe the moment you realize you're really kind of losing it. And what a mental breakdown, for lack of a better description, really is. But we were in Venice, And Venice is beautiful, but I would never go back to Venice because it was a nightmare for me. And I remember we were in a youth hostel, and my travel mates had left the room to go do something, but I stayed there because I didn't want to, I didn't want to get lost. I just wanted to be by myself. And that's when I banged my head against the wall. I don't know how many times, a lot. I mean, hard. And because it was trying to feel something, other than just the pain of the mental illness. The pain of the mental illness is hard to describe because I think part of it is fear and part of it is the illness, the depression. But a lot of it is this just panic, like, what is wrong with me? Because you don't know what's wrong with you. You haven't been diagnosed. You haven't gone to a psychiatrist. You haven't done anything. You just think you're weird.
Shortly after her trip to Venice, Wendall was admitted to a private psychiatric hospital in Asheville, North Carolina in 1989. This is where she would formally be diagnosed with bipolar I disorder. In her book, she says that her stay here was the most therapeutic out of many. She saw several doctors on a regular basis and maintained an active schedule. But she could only stay for 5 months because of the cost of this treatment. Her parents spent over $100,000 in just the fall of 1989 for Wendall's care. This says a lot about the cost of and access to care. Though Wendall has the funds today to afford the necessary care that she needs, the majority of people don't.
I have a great doctor, but I pay to see this great doctor. And but I have Medicare because I'm disabled, and she decided to accept Medicare for her patients. A lot of psychiatrists won't even accept Medicare. Or a lot of psychiatrists won't even accept insurance, which I think is a real problem. And but she does, so I've been lucky. But I do spend a lot of my money, my expendable money, on psychiatry. But for me, it's worth it because without it, I wouldn't be anywhere. I wouldn't be able to live.
Coming up after the break.
I know that the prison systems are now the mental hospitals of the 21st century. I know that.
And
when you say you are bipolar, you're really cutting yourself in half.
This message is brought to you by She Plus Podcast.
I want to talk to you about the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI. NAMI is a completely free resource for you or a loved one if you're in need of professional mental health help. As a national nonprofit organization, NAMI has been working for years to improve access to resources and change public attitudes about mental health. Our very own She Plus guest, Wendall Churchill, found her community through the Low Country affiliate chapter of NAMI, and you can too. NAMI has over 600 affiliate chapters nationwide. NAMI also provides resources for family members and loved ones struggling to cope with and understand mental illness. Head over to www.nami.org to find your local affiliate chapter and learn how you can get involved. Welcome back. On this episode of She Plus, we're talking with Wendall Churchill, author of Confessions of Madness, about her journey with bipolar disorder. I really love to read. I actually used to really not like to read, but quarantine has since opened my eyes to the wonders of fiction and nonfiction. And I want to recommend a book to you that I read earlier this year. It's called Just Mercy, a story of justice and redemption, written by Brian Stevenson. The book is about the criminal justice system in America, and it focuses on the story of the wrongful conviction of Walter McMillan in Alabama and the efforts to free him from death row. It was also adapted into a movie, which I do recommend, but like with most book-to-movie relationships, this movie missed a few important details, like the chapter detailing how mentally ill and disabled persons are treated within the criminal justice system in the United States. Now, I don't have the rights to read quotes from the book, but thanks to the American Psychiatric Association, I can tell you that more than half of those in the criminal justice system suffer from a mental illness. More than half. And according to the Prison Policy Initiative, the American criminal justice system holds about 2.3 million people in a variety of facilities. And those facilities include state and federal prisons, immigration detention facilities, and state psychiatric hospitals. Wendall wrote about her experience in a public psychiatric hospital in her book.
I was very drugged, so my memory of it is not real vivid. But they had I have phonitis. When I get manic or even very, very depressed, I get phonitis, which means I like to talk on the phone. I call everybody I know and want to talk to them. So when I was in the hospital, they had a box on the payphone, like a lock box. So you couldn't get to it. So I started banging on the box, and they did not like that at all. So they threw me in the seclusion room. And the seclusion room is a padded room and barred windows and just a tile floor. And they give you a rubber mattress to lay on. And I think people urinate in there so it doesn't smell good. And I don't know how long I was in there, but they gave me a meal. And of course, I didn't want that. I wanted the phone. And so I threw it, and then I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to get out of here. And I started panicking, and then I didn't know what to do. So I didn't remember doing this. So a psychiatrist, a later psychiatrist, I guess, read the records and told me that I did this. But I picked some of it up and ate some of it, like an animal. And because I thought that was going to get me out, because my mind was so decompressed and fallen apart so much that I didn't really know that you don't do that, and but I would get out, and then they would lock me up again. I guess I'd bang on the box or something. I don't know, but other people were doing terrible things in there. I mean, there was sex among the patients. My roommate was stealing my clothes. I didn't really know it until I checked out, so to speak. And I didn't have half of what I brought with me. And the food was tasted like it had a metal taste to it. So it was really awful. And then when I was going to be released, they have a little hearing, and they set you up, and there's like 5 to 7 doctors and nurses behind a table, and then you're behind a table. It's like, in my book, I said it's like a parole board review. And they let me out. I don't know why they did. I didn't get any better, so it was. But yeah, it was awful. It was really awful.
In the book, Wendall writes about this experience of solitary confinement. She writes, "Inside that abhorrent facility, much of our behavior became consistent with those of animals." I talked to Wendall about the book Just Mercy and asked about her thoughts on the treatment of mentally ill people in the criminal justice system.
I know that the prison systems are now the mental hospitals of the 21st century. I know that. And I think it's a crime, really. But the mental hospitals were not good, and so they shut them all. And then now, people that need to be in the hospitals are out on the streets, and of course they're going to commit a crime for a loaf of bread or a pack of gum or whatever. I don't imagine most of the crimes are very significant, and they just punish them because they don't know what to do. I guess money needs to be put into mental health and into proper care in mental hospitals for the mentally ill, and into doctors and into good medications, that work for people, and the government needs to pump a lot of money into it.
But it wasn't just the state psychiatric hospital that Wendall experienced in Baltimore. She also had some run-ins with law enforcement.
I had terrible run-ins with the police when I was in Baltimore. I would, I guess I would threaten suicide, and my doctor would send the police to my house. One time, probably 6 police officers came into my room, and I was in my bed, and I had pill bottles on the floor because I had just overdosed, and they all stood there with their hands on their guns. You know, it makes you very uncomfortable with someone with their hand on their gun. I don't like guns anyway, leave alone someone's hand on it. And they were really mean. Then they threw me in the back of a paddy wagon, and I undid the seatbelt. And my advice is never to do that because you fly all over the paddy wagon. And so somehow I got it back on. But they needed mental health training. They needed skills to deal with the mentally ill because they treated me like I was an offender and a threat, and you know I wasn't. And I just this little thing. I didn't weigh much because I didn't eat anyway. But they were still mean to me when they realized I didn't have a gun. Today I wouldn't, for lack of a better word, act out. You know, I wouldn't say, I would just sit there and be totally quiet. Where back then I might wrestle or something, you know, but I was young and I didn't know, I hadn't learned the skills to stay calm, and people can't help it. They don't do that on purpose, you know, they don't want to be that way.
After 8 years of living in Baltimore, Wendall moved in with her mother in South Carolina. But things did not improve. In Chapter 8, Wendall writes a sentence that I highlighted in bright yellow because it struck me when I read it. She says, "I have been forced to endure both human disgrace and public humiliation in a world where many believe mental illness is a sign of weakness and of one's own doing." Wendall touches on something here that is unfortunately etched deep into the fabric of our society. Society often paints individuals suffering from mental illness as crazy, weak, or dangerous. But organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, are working to put an end to this harmful and untrue narrative. If you type mental illness as a sign of weakness into a Google search bar, every result on the first page explains exactly why it is not a weakness. That's a powerful and immense change. But it wasn't always that way, and Wendall experienced the harsh realities of those negative perceptions.
Well, I definitely thought it was perceived as a weakness. Like when I was working, you know, my boss would look at me funny if I was like 10 minutes late, and you know, if he definitely, you know, and then when he thought, because I shook for my medicine, he thought I had Parkinson's, and then one day I just decided to tell him. He got even meaner than he was thinking I had Parkinson's. He got doubly mean. So it does make you feel like it's your fault, your weakness, you know, get up, go to work. You can make it, you can do it. And I'm having a panic attack and I can't make it. And then I think my family's lack of support and kind of, I don't know, you know, I did really well academically and athletically when I was young. And then all of a sudden everything fell out from under me. And so I think they didn't tolerate that too well. And so that made me feel like it was my fault and my weakness and of my own choice even.
But Wendall's tone shifts in Chapter 10. Because Wendall found a local psychiatrist named Dr. Rosenbaum. In her therapeutic sessions and work with Dr. Rosenbaum, Wendall learned an incredibly important lesson that she stresses in both her book and our interview.
I think learning to say I have bipolar disorder, even if it just takes you practice to say it over and over, it takes the pressure off somehow. It takes the diagnosis doesn't have to define you. Where it defined most of my adult life until recently. And it ruined it, and and I was alone for 20 some years. And it was unnecessary. It didn't have to be that way. And I think if, you get the right care, and I think NAMI is free. So the reason I want to hone in on NAMI is NAMI's free, and it's a support, and you get perspective of, I don't have bipolar disorder, or I'm not bipolar disorder. I have bipolar disorder in meetings like that, because people don't want to be defined by an illness. You don't want to be defined, I am cancer, I am diabetes, or whatever, and mental illness has an even stronger negative connotation than those. So when you say you are bipolar, you're really cutting yourself in half. You're not looking at yourself with any positive light, and that's what everyone needs. People who just get diagnosed or whatever, not necessarily kids, but teenagers, 20-year-olds who just get diagnosed, if they can say I have bipolar and not I am bipolar, just saying that as part of how you might describe your illness or describe what you're going through or whatever, makes a tremendous difference, because it changes the whole twist. And it's not a burden to bear. It's not a shame. It's just a disease.
The importance of saying, I have bipolar I disorder, rather than I am bipolar. The importance of recognizing that your disorder, your illness, whatever it may be, does not define you. You are so much more than just a disorder, an illness, or a condition. Though it took 30 years for Wendall to no longer let bipolar disorder completely define her, she wants to encourage listeners to practice saying it. I have bipolar disorder, or whatever it is that might be defining you. Go ahead, give it a try. In Wendall's own words, at 50 years old, things are different now. But she wants to give one last final piece of advice to listeners about managing your disorder.
If you can, get the family involved. That would be very important. And if you can't, like my situation, you just got to accept it and find family elsewhere. And take, you have to take the mental illness very seriously and treat it. You have to treat yourself with care, and I certainly believe in taking medication. I know a lot of people struggle with that and don't want to take it. I've never had that particular problem, but I think it's worth it, and it's also worth it in the long run, because if you don't take it, your mind can get damaged and stuff.
I'll finish out this episode by reading my favorite quote from Wendall's book. In the final chapter, as Wendall has found her path towards acceptance, she writes, "Now, after nearly 25 years of psychiatric care, I am finally able to acknowledge that I am worthy, I am beautiful, I love and I am loved, which speaks volumes to me. I have survived my trauma and I can breathe again." That's all for this episode of She Plus. If you or a loved one is suffering from a mental illness or disorder, please take a look at the free mental health resources provided by the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI. They have over 600 affiliate chapters nationwide and are dedicated to helping you navigate your life. Wendall writes extensively about her experience with NAMI and how NAMI Lowcountry became her family. Check out www.nami.org for more information. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.